Hi, this is Jordan Ramirez, and normally I host my podcast show, Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. Now I am hosting a special show for my podcast, Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez Minisode Jordan Ramirez Recommends. The minisodes are now airing every Monday at 12 p.m. as part of the Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez podcast. So, without further ado, you are listening to a Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez minisode. My recommended film is the contemporary fantasy drama Song of the Sea, directed by Tom Moore, starring David Rohl, Brendan Gleeson, and Fionnuala Flanagan. Ben, played by David Rohl, lives on an island with his father, Connor, played by Brendan Gleeson, and his sister Saoirse, played by Lucy O'Connell. After Ben's mother left the family, it's now just Ben, his sister, and their father living on the island. At first, Ben does not get along with his sister since he blames her for their mother's leaving the family or disappearance. When their grandmother, played by Fionnuala Flanagan, arrives to take Ben and Saoirse to live with her in the city, at first their father refuses since it is already Saoirse's 6th birthday, but ultimately Saoirse starts to learn the secret about her lineage and a special item that reveals her true identity. A fur coat that when worn and used to go out in the sea turns her into a seal. It turns out that Saoirse is a Selkie, and after the secret was revealed, both Ben and Saoirse end up living with their grandmother in the city. I adore this film as the second of the Irish folklore trilogy from Cartoon Saloon. What I love about this film is the mythological aspect of the story. The stories that his mother in the film passed on to Ben were the stories about MacLear and how he was turned to stone, the fairies who were awaiting the Selkie's magic singing voice to awake their kind from the witch's curse, the great Senekai and his long strand of hair that each tells a story, and the great Maka and her owls whose son MacLear was turned to stone since he lost someone whom he loved. So her owls would take away the emotions from the fairies and the Selkies, and they would be turned to stone as their emotions are sucked away in these glass jars. The mythological story is paralleled with Ben's father, who takes on the role of MacLear, and his grandmother, who doubles as Maka. An example is a single shot of the island that is shaped after MacLear turned into stone in one sequence, and in the next scene at the pub, Connor is now framed and in the exact same position as MacLear when he was turned into stone. Another example is when the grandmother is about to see her grandchildren on the island. The ferryman refers to the grandmother as a witch, which would later foreshadow her double role later in the story as Maka, whom Ben would meet and confront with. I enjoy the vocal performances from David Rohl as Ben, the main protagonist. At first, when his character is cold towards his sister Saoirse, he becomes jealous and starts to blame his sister for their mother's disappearance. But as the story progresses, he then starts to care about his sister since he learns about her secret. Rohl's performance as the older brother is emotional and feels relatable for those who have lost someone special in their life, but don't want to relive something like this again. Brendan Gleeson as their father, Connor, is amazing in his performance. Connor in the film had lost his wife and is only living with his 2 children since they are all that he has left as his family. But it becomes emotional when it is hard for him to let go of his daughter when she follows the same path as her mother, which brings to the performance of Fionnuala Flanagan as the grandmother in the story. Flanagan's performance starts out as someone who feels and looks cold-hearted, but we, the audience, realize that she is doing it for the sake of her son who has lost someone who could never share happiness or joy afterwards. But she is trying to do what is best to make the pain go away for her son and to take her grandchildren to the city. The genesis of the story, as Tom Moore stated in an interview, began on a holiday with his wife and son. Quote, "I was on vacation with my family, and while walking on a beach, we saw some seals that had been killed. It made me think about how mythology and folklore links people to the environment and to the culture around them in a way that was being lost. That became something I wanted to explore in Song of the Sea." End quote. The process from idea to the final project took 5 years during the making of The Secret of Kells. Tom and his team made sure to get the appropriate ingredients to get the film made, putting together the script, working on concept art and storyboarding, discussing with the musicians about what the music should sound like for the film, etc. It wasn't until October 2010 that the studio received financing for the project. They next worked on the animation and doing rewrites in the story process. During the next 18 to 20 months of production, the small team at Cartoon Saloon were now working with their co-producers at other animation studios in Europe as a co-production to help get the project done on time. For the beautiful background design, environments, and character designs, the task went to Adrien Merigiu. Tom Moore. Adrien had been coming up with his own ideas. He's a much better painter than I am. He's much better with light, for example. We mashed our styles together and came up with this technique where we draw the lines on paper, paint the watercolor on another page, and put everything together in the computer. Ultimately, we ended up often designing and creating elements like rocks on their own page and compositing them together into one image. So it was a hybrid of hand-drawn techniques and Photoshop. The patterns you see on rocks, for example, a lot of these designs are based on sacred geometry carved on ancient rocks in Scotland and Ireland. You'll see it on really old picture stones. We went on some research trips to get ideas. What really impressed Adrian was the fact he felt it looked like modern art. He felt they looked like Klee and Kandinsky. It was a really interesting reference point. So we incorporate some of that into the designs as well." End quote. It made its premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 6, 2014 in Toronto, Canada. It later premiered in the United States on November 9, 2014 at the AFI Fest. It was later given a limited release in the United States on December 19th that same year. The reviews for the film were overwhelmingly positive at the animation, direction, story, music, performances, etc. The film would receive numerous accolades, including winning the Satellite Award for Best Animated or Mixed Media Feature and the European Film Award for Best Animated Feature Film. It would be nominated for Best Animated Feature at the 2014 Academy Awards and the 2014 Annie Awards. If you're looking for a delightfully entertaining hero's journey that uses Irish mythology but also want the warmth and tenderness of family, kinship, loss, and music, then this film is just for you. It is a film that I highly recommend that would be a great alternative for you to watch and enjoy as much as I did. The Irish Folklore Trilogy, in my opinion, are my 3 favorite films to come from Ireland, which I also discussed in my podcast episode. On the next episode of Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, an experimental avant-garde film from Todd Haynes, Poison, directed by Todd Haynes. That's coming up this Friday on Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez at 4 p.m. on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Radio Public. This has been a Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez minisode. Tune into the minisodes every Monday at 12 p.m. and Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez every Friday at 4 p.m. on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Radio Public. If you are on Spotify, make sure to like and subscribe to keep the show going, and make sure to recommend to your friends and family members to tune into this podcast. I also have my own YouTube channel, Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, where you can watch my video podcast and make sure to like and subscribe. And until then, I'll see you at the movies.